The MK6 GTI is a fun, sporty, and surprisingly practical car that's a very enjoyable car to own when it's working correctly. Now, there are a handful of things that commonly go wrong with these cars that could spoil your fun and cost you a good chunk of change, and this video is going to show you how to avoid those. My name's Cash, and you're watching CashedOutCars, and in today's video, we're going to be going over common failures of the MK6 GTI. Starting out the list at number 1, we have timing chain tensioner failures. Now, this is something that mostly occurs on earlier 2.0 TSI engines, specifically before about 2013. These cars have a tensioner that holds the timing chain in place and makes sure it doesn't rattle around too much and get too much slack and jump a tooth. And if it does happen to jump a tooth, your engine's going to be in bad shape because you're going to have a valve crash and you're going to need to spend a lot of money on a new cylinder head. Now, this was revised, like I said, mid-2013, so if you have a car after that, you're likely in good shape. If you have a car before that, it might have been already revised and you don't have to worry about it. But the way to check this is to look inside the passenger wheel well and look at the engine this way, and there's an inspection port in there that you could pop out. You could check the part number on the tensioner itself. If it has a K in it, it has been revised. If it doesn't, it's likely the old version, and you're going to want to get that replaced if you have the old tensioner. Now, this isn't something that's guaranteed to fail if you have the old tensioner, but keeping that up to date will make sure that your engine has the best chance of living a long, successful life and not failing on you prematurely. Next up, coming in at number 2 on the list, we have a problem that's pretty widely spread over most Volkswagen models, and that is carbon buildup. Now, that is specifically a problem on these 2.0 engines because they use direct injection, which means that fuel is sprayed directly into the cylinder rather than over the valves. What this means for is you could have a more efficient, more powerful engine, but that comes at the expense of carbon building up on the valves because fuel isn't sprayed over them, which does also keep them clean. Now, if your car is down on performance or if it's just feeling sluggish and it's a higher mileage car, you might want to look to get your carbon cleaned off of your valves. Now, there are a lot of ways that you could do this. They sell walnut blast kits where you literally blast the shells of walnuts over your valves and it just blasts off all the built up carbon and makes everything nice and clean so you get good airflow into your engine and you don't lose power and performance. This is something that is fairly common, like I said, and it's likely going to have to be done if you're looking at a higher mileage car. Some people say that it should be done every 50 to 70,000 miles, but it depends on how up to date you want to be with keeping your engine running perfectly. Next up, at number 3, we have something that actually sort of pairs nicely with the carbon buildup. And that is there's a flap inside your intake manifold that opens and closes depending on what the conditions are for the car. And often this fails. Now, there's a little plastic arm in there that normally fails and makes it so the flap doesn't actuate as normal. Sometimes there's also solenoid issues that open and close it, but that's less common. Now, if that fails, you're likely going to need a new intake manifold, which coincidentally needs to be removed if you're going to do a carbon cleaning. So this, once again, is a fairly expensive part that you don't want to fail, but if it does fail, it provides a good opportunity to go ahead and clean your engine of carbon. If this failure occurs, you're likely going to get worse fuel economy once again. You might get a check engine light, and also you might get codes that are specific to the intake manifold. So if you get any of those, definitely look into the flap in your intake manifold, and you might have to replace it. And like I said, it's a good time to clean out your engine of carbon. Next up on the list, we have something that's fairly common to fail among most Volkswagen models, but also among these 2-liter TSI and FSI engines, and that is coil packs. Now, if your car is stumbling and hesitating and really doesn't feel like it's running right, there's a good chance that you're going to need to replace your coil packs. Another telltale sign that this is happening is a misfire code. It'll say a specific cylinder that the car is missing on, and this is the indicator of which specific coil pack is failing. Now, sometimes if this happens, you'll be able to pop off your plastic engine cover and inspect and pull the coil packs, clean them out, and put them back into place, and your problem will go away. Other times you'll need to replace your coil packs, and while you're in there pulling your coil packs, it's not a bad time to replace your spark plugs. Once again, this is a pretty telltale sign if your car is stumbling and not running right and just running really rough, and if it's down on power and you get any sort of misfire code, the first thing to check should be your coil packs. I have a video on my channel that shows you how to pull them and clean them and how to replace them if you're interested. It's not really a very big process. It's actually one of the more easy failures to fix that's on this list. Next up on the list, we have another engine problem, and that is Wastegate Rattle. Now, the turbos on these cars are internally gated, which means all the exhaust flow passes through the turbo, and once you hit a certain boost level, the wastegate opens up and maintains that boost level and makes it so you're not making tons of boost and damaging your engine. Also, you could often modify this to make more boost, but that's for another day. So anyway, the wastegates on these cars often rattle, and the actuator arm rattles around a lot and loosens itself up. And what this could lead to is underboosting issues because your wastegate will open up when you don't want it to, and this could lead to less power. Also, you might hear an audible rattling noise coming from your engine, and if you hear something like that, look for wastegate rattle. You might need to get a clip to either solve the rattle if you catch it early enough, or eventually replace your turbo because the parts vibrate around and wear out. Number 6 on the list, we have yet another engine failure of these Volkswagens. And this one isn't a major problem, but the PCV valves often fail on this and don't let excess pressure out of the engine. And when that happens, you're more prone to blow seals on your engine, specifically the rear main seal. And this will cause oil leaks, and you're going to want to get that replaced because, well, you're going to be dumping oil, and it's not good for the environment, and it's not good for your car. Now, that is located under your plastic engine cover, so you could pop that off, easily get to it, and there are tons of good video tutorials that will show you how to replace that if you think it's failing. Next up on the list, we have another valve problem, and this time it is the diverter valve. So when you let off throttle, the boost needs to go somewhere. Often you'll have blow-off valves which vent to atmosphere. These cars have diverter valves which vent some of the boost back into the systems, but anyway, these fail. Now, if this fails, you're going to have, once again, less boost than you should because it's going to be leaking boost pressure. This means that your car is not going to be able to make as much power as it should be making, and you're not going to have as good of a time with your car. Now, if you think this is failing, you're going to have, once again, less power. You might hear a leak, but you most likely will not hear anything. And this part is located underneath the engine. It's fairly easy to change. Next up on the list, we have another thing that's fairly common on GTIs, and that is a water pump failure. Now, this is common on most GTIs. Mine failed on my Mark 7 GTI, and it was also just replaced on this Mark 6 GTI. And the water pumps often crack and start to leak. So if you have a coolant leak, if you notice that your coolant level is down, you might want to suspect your water pump. Also, if you hear like a vacuum cleaner sort of sound, your water pump might be damaged and you're going to want to get it replaced. So if you have these symptoms, consider looking at your water pump. On the Mark 6 GTI, this was a recall and they changed them. Now they might charge you a little bit for it. It depends on what year your car is and what mileage it's at. But that's something that Volkswagen knows about and that Volkswagen probably will take care of for you. One thing to keep in mind is a water pump failure probably will not trigger a check engine light, so you need to smell for coolant. If you smell a sweet smell coming from your engine bay, it's probably coolant. And take a look at your reservoir, and if it's low on coolant, you might want to suspect your water pump. Next up on the list, we have yet another little valve failure, and this one is the EVAP Purge valve. It's very easy to get to. It's right here on the front of the engine, and what that does is control fuel vapor from your fuel tank from escaping to the atmosphere, and it controls it going to the intake manifold. Now, if that fails, you might get an EVAP code coming up if you scan your car, and you also might get a rough idle. The nice thing about this is it's inexpensive, and like I said, it's literally right here on the front of the engine, so it's quite easy to get to and replace if you think this is a failure. Next up on the list, coming in at number 10, we have something that's a less common failure, but when it fails, the car might cut out, and that is the fuel pump control module. Now, this is located under the rear seat. There are videos on how to fix it, but like I said, if this does happen, the car might cut out because you won't be able to get fuel to your engine, and this one might leave you stranded. So if that happens and you got your car towed back to your house, you might want to look into this to see if that is what failed. In addition to those 10 things that I talked about, other common failures that you're going to want to look for is rust. These cars tend to get a little bit of rust, but not as bad as the previous generations. Obviously, the previous generations are older though, so they've had a longer chance to rust. Look for the rust on the rear emblem of these cars because water builds up in there and they rust, and also on the rockers. Now, you want to look for rust that'll compromise the structural integrity of the car, but also consider that if a car is rusty, it's going to be harder for you to work on. Also consider that the clutches in a Mark 6 GTI for a manual car can't handle tons and tons of power, so if you plan on tuning this and doing some sort of power mod, you might want to consider that you're probably going to have to replace the clutch too. The DSG transmissions are very good transmissions, but you'll have to service them more, and it's going to cost more to service than something like a manual transmission. The coolant temperature sensors sometimes go out on these cars, and overall, I'm not trying to say these cars are bad. I'm just trying to make this video to show you what could go wrong if you buy one, or if you have one, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms. So with all that said, I hope you guys found this video valuable and that you learned something from it. If there are any other failures that have happened to your car that you want other people to know about, leave them down below to help out our fellow GTI and Volkswagen enthusiast community. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe for more. I hope you stick around for the next one.